Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we plant up my vegetable garden. So let's go. It is the third week of April and I'm about 3 weeks away from my average last frost date. Right behind me is a raised garden bed that we made almost 20 years ago. The dimensions of it are about 12 feet by 19 feet. And when we made this raised garden bed, we honestly didn't really know the rules about when you make a raised vegetable garden bed, how big they should be created. But after lots of years of gardening and reading and looking at videos on YouTube, I've learned that you usually want your garden beds to be smaller than this. And the reason is when you have a raised garden bed, you don't want to be stepping inside the garden bed because then you're compacting the soil. And that's not good for the plants that are in there. And you want your garden beds to be small enough so that you can walk around them and weed and harvest from both sides of the garden bed. I've been wanting to redo this bed for a few reasons. Number one, because of the size of it, but also number two, because the wood is starting to fall apart. But for this year, because we are already well into spring, I figured we're just going to go with what we have and we're going to plant in it. This garden bed is placed on the east side of my house, and you can see behind me that there are a lot of woods in this area. So even though this does get sun, I would not say that it gets full sun all day long. In the past, what I've noticed is my cucumbers do very well when I plant them on that side of the garden bed. My peas do really well right behind me on that side of the bed. In the very center of the bed, I have a perennial, which is asparagus, and that does very well in here. I usually plant green beans right behind me, and those always do really well. When it comes to things like tomatoes, any of the squashes, peppers, as well as eggplant, I like to plant those in pots, and I like to plant them on another side of my house where it's a lot sunnier. And we'll be planting up those pots on a different day when it's a lot warmer. Now, one thing I've noticed about this bed is because of the fact that it doesn't get full sun, I've always struggled with what else to plant in this bed. So what I did this year was I made up a plan and I put it on a piece of paper, and I basically really thought about the plants that I want to put in here, the things that I've already started from seed, the things that I want to start from seed, and also I looked at how many days until the harvest so that I can try to do some succession planting. When it comes to amending the bed, I had researched that for the asparagus, the best time to amend that part of the bed with compost would have been in the fall, and I missed that window. The second best time to amend your asparagus bed is after you're done harvesting it, which is usually later in the spring, early in the summer. So once I'm done harvesting my asparagus, I will definitely be amending that with my compost that I make. Speaking of the asparagus, I had started most of the asparagus from seed about 3 to 4 years ago. Typically, when you start asparagus from seed, you have to wait a few years before you can harvest from it. Now is the best time for me to be harvesting that asparagus, and I can't wait. And then there were a few asparagus plants that I did buy bare root. But if you can start them from seed, you can really grow a lot of asparagus for very little money. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to get some compost, and we're going to be amending certain parts of this bed with the compost. Normally in past years, what I would do is I would buy bagged compost and I would amend the whole entire bed with that compost. I don't want to waste the compost. This is compost that I've made. I've worked very hard to make that compost. So what we'll be doing is we'll be amending the rows where we'll be planting our seeds as well as our plants. Okay, so let's head to the south side of my house where my compost pile is. I've been making my own compost for the last 4 or 5 years. I'll put a link down in the description below showing you my process for making my compost. It's actually very simple. I get a lot of leaves here where I live, and leaves are just wonderful base for your compost pile. Plus, I love to use my chicken scraps and all the vegetation from when I cut back all my perennials. It's really just the best thing you can give your plants. So right here is a compost pile that is finished. I made this pile last year. I let it cook and heat up, and that's what's left over, and it's perfect for me to use for this season. Right behind me are a couple of bins of compost material that was put together last year. It's definitely not finished. So my goal is to use up this pile pretty soon, meaning in the next few weeks, and then it'll free up this space, and then I'm going to be mixing up that pile over there and heating it up so that that can start cooking. I'll make a separate video showing you my process for doing that. So what we're going to do right now is just shovel up some compost, and I'm going to be putting them in buckets. I'm just going to cover my compost pile back up because I like to keep it dry. I don't want it to get too wet, and it just keeps any weed seeds from germinating in here. I would be lying if I told you that all we're doing is working on the vegetable garden today. A lot of times I like to do 2 jobs at once, especially if it's something like this. We have a lot of brush from basically the winter months. Because there are so many trees around the yard, there is a lot of debris, a lot of trees that break, limbs that fall. So my husband was very nice and he picked up a bunch of it. I helped him, but he did most of it. And he asked me to burn it today because there is even more of this kind of debris, probably a similar amount around the yard that needs to come over here, but there's no room for it. And what's really nice is not only does it clean up my yard, but wood ash is perfect. It's very good to add to a compost pile. Of course, you don't want to be doing this job on a very windy day, and you don't want to be doing it too close to the woods. The placement of this fire pit is perfect for us. We used to pay a tree company to take away all our debris, and that gets very expensive. So being able to collect your own debris from the yard, burn it, and then use the wood ash in the compost pile is a wonderful thing. You just have to be careful, that's all. You don't want to make your fire too big. All right, good enough. I tell you, 5 buckets was enough. It's pretty heavy. You don't want to hurt yourself. And if I need to get more, I can always get more. But we'll start with this. I'm just placing them around the garden, and that way it makes it easier to access them. Hey, last one. I think the next thing we're going to do is let's head over to my rolling carts and let's bring over some vegetable plants that I started indoors under my LED shop lights earlier this year. We might as well turn this into a mini garden tour. So over here is purple of Sicily cauliflower, and then right next to it over here are Brussels sprouts that are looking great. I bet you know what this is. This is Swiss chard. We have spinach over here. The onion's looking a little dry, but once it gets in the ground and it starts getting water regularly, it'll be fine. So we have lots of onion starts over here. I showed this in another video. These are just a bunch of pansies. Over here, these are broccoli starts. And then we have a bunch of cabbage and some more broccoli. Over here is some lettuce. Over there is some cilantro and some perennials over towards the front. And then more of the same plants we've already talked about. It's just a mix of some broccoli and cabbage and other plants in there. And in case you wonder, why do I grow so much? It's because I also have a backyard plant nursery and I'm intending on selling some of them. And I may also donate some of them to a local community garden. Now, I'm not a big fan of having lettuce out in my vegetable garden. I don't love when the dirt splatters up on the leaves, and I'm not going to be putting down any black plastic. But at this point, I'm okay planting these, and I'll do the best I can with harvesting them and cleaning off the leaves. I think they'll grow a lot better out there. Now, keep in mind, this lettuce is quite old. I've been picking off of it for quite a while. I had it indoors. We really enjoyed it. So at this point, it's just a matter of seeing how much more I can get off of it. And we may end up planting some more from seed. We'll see. You know, it's kind of a joke because do I really eat all of this type of food? I mean, I would. Like, I like broccoli. I admit I like broccoli with dip. And the Brussels sprouts, I've had it in restaurants and it's very tasty. So I want to try to make it at home. The Swiss chard's very pretty. I just don't know how to eat it. So I'm going to learn. I would imagine you could put it in a salad. And I'm a big fan of eating just leafy greens with a little bit of dressing and some croutons and other vegetables mixed in. So I think between the spinach and the Swiss chard, that would make a nice little salad, as well as, of course, the lettuce that we have here. When it comes to cauliflower, it's similar to broccoli. I like to have that with a little bit of dip. So I'm not going to go crazy when it comes to planting all of these because I'm pretty much the only one in my family that will be eating these. My daughter may eat some of the broccoli, we'll see, but it's mostly going to be me. So I'm not going to plant a lot. So let's go shopping on my rolling cart here. I basically pulled 4 of each, which I think to start with is plenty. If I need more, well, we know where we can find it. The first thing we're going to plant are the peas. And here's the compost that we collected. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to sprinkle a light layer. You can see that I've already made basically a row or a furrow where the peas are going to go. Typically, you want to plant your peas between 1 to 2 inches deep, and they should be about 2 inches apart. So let's go ahead and spread the compost. And it really doesn't take a lot of compost. You don't need to go too heavy on it. Did you know that peas are nitrogen fixers? It has something to do with the roots, and I'll put a little more information on the screen about it. Some places say not to plant the peas in the same place every year, but given the way that the light is in this garden, this is really the best place for me to plant my peas. So I do plant them here every year in the same place. The variety of peas that we're going to plant is called Early Frosty. And I put a date on here, 2014. So these peas are about 10 years old. And I have full faith that they are still very good. I've been planting them for the last many years and they all seem to come up. Now, normally I do soak my peas overnight, maybe even a couple of days until I see them starting to sprout. But at a minimum, they usually recommend it's a good idea to soak them overnight. But also last year we didn't soak them. We just put them directly in the ground and they sprouted just fine. So it really comes down to your weather conditions, the soil temperature, if you're getting too much rain, if you're not getting enough rain. And I feel like it's a good time of year for me to just directly sow these in the ground. And if I find in a week that they haven't sprouted, then I can try it again because I still have plenty of time and I still have plenty of peas. And you can see they're in these little Ziploc bags and they actually have a little red coating to them. And sometimes peas are coated like that when you buy them. I bought them in a very big, large bag. They were marked down at the end of the season. And so what I did was I then divided them up into these small little bags. I'll cover them up afterwards. And you don't need to be exact when it comes to the spacing. The key is I want to be as close to this wire trellis as I can be. And when they start popping up, I can then push them closer to the trellis. Just pushing them in. The next thing to do is just cover the peas and press down so that they have good contact with the soil. One thing I've learned when it comes to gardening is there will be some years that are better than others. There will be some years that you get a great harvest on a certain vegetable or flowers, and other years not so great. And I think it's all just learning opportunities. But also, when it comes to like peas, for example, I know I'm late this year with getting these in the ground, but it's all relative. I'm still going to enjoy them. They're still going to grow. They still will be fine. So maybe I won't be enjoying them as quickly as I could have. But sometimes we just have to look past all that. Because otherwise, I think when it comes to something like, gardening and vegetable gardening specifically, it can make us just want to stop. And you don't want that. So that's my advice to you, is don't give up. And if something doesn't succeed, try it again. Let's say you try planting these peas and they rot, they don't come up, but you still have time. Do another, crop, try it again. That's the way I look at it. I would say peas are one of the easiest crops you can grow. So if you're new to vegetable gardening, I say give peas a try. And if you have children, it's an especially easy thing for them to help you with. In fact, I have a really cute picture of my mother-in-law planting her peas with my children. It's a great memory. Now we do have rain in the forecast for tomorrow. However, we're still going to water these in. And I don't have any irrigation set up in this bed. I may end up putting irrigation in at some point, I'm not sure. But until then, I just need to hand water this vegetable garden. So that's it. Pretty simple. Let's go ahead and give these peas some water. There's so many things that I want to do in my garden right now, but I knew that this job just had to be done. Because once, I've planted the cool weather crops, then I'm good for at least 3 weeks. So this was very important to get this done. And hopefully you're enjoying the process and just seeing what I'm doing, even if I'm a little late. So I'd love to know if you've planted up your vegetable garden, and if so, what have you planted? And I'm considering, once I make this garden, smaller, even if it's like 3 raised beds, let's say, I'm considering putting black plastic down and burning holes through the plastic to help eliminate weeds. And I'd love to know if that's something that you do in your garden and how it works out for you. When it comes to fertilizer, I feel like the compost is the best fertilizer that you can give. So that's all I'm planning to do when it comes to fertilizing my vegetables. So after tomorrow's rain, I don't think we have much rain in the forecast. I'll just be diligent about coming out here, checking on this and watering. And the one thing I'm also going to be checking for is if I didn't plant some of the peas deep enough and I see them popping out of the ground, I'll just tuck them back in. I went ahead and just added some compost to this section here. This is where the brassicas are going to go. So we have the broccoli, the cabbage, the cauliflower, and the Brussels sprouts. The reason I want them all together is so that I can basically tent this area and keep the cabbage worms out of from destroying my plants. And other than tenting this with some sort of insect netting, I did buy some BT, and if I needed to apply BT to them, it's very easy to apply it all in this one space. I really want to have success this year with my brassicas. In the past, I haven't had a lot of success, but I also didn't try very hard. and the worms would just attack my plants. So this year I'm really going to try better for that. And one thing I want to mention is right here is where the asparagus row ends. So if we need to extend this section a little bit, like up to here, we can do that at that time. But I figured let's get some compost down, let's start placing the plants, and let's see what we have to work with. I had done a little research in regards to spacing, and what I found was it said that you should be spacing all of these brassicas generally between 12 inches and about 24 inches. But I've also found, based on research, that when it comes to spacing, you don't always have to follow those rules. So I will probably be spacing things a little bit closer. And I'm just going to stagger the planting. I always like to lay out my plants, be it vegetables like this or flowers, just to kind of get a feel for the spacing and how things are going to look. So far we have the Brussels sprouts there. Next we're going to do the cauliflower. So far we have the Brussels sprouts and we have the cauliflower. I forgot to get broccoli as well as cabbage. So I'm going to go get those and we will continue putting them in this section here. I got 6 plants of the broccoli and 5 plants of the cabbage. So based on that, I think I'm going to space these even a little bit closer. I used to have grapes in this section here, and Mr. Budget Gardener helped me and he dug them out. This is why this lawn is dead over here. I didn't really do a good job with pruning the grapes, and so they were going crazy everywhere. So he just hacked them way back. He put them in pots, and we'll figure out what we're going to do with them. But I really didn't want the grapes anymore in this bed, so this works out perfectly. The next thing we're going to do is just start getting these put in the ground. Okay, so for real, it is like 4:30 in the afternoon, and I started filming this video, I don't know, maybe like 9 a.m. But there's fertilizing to be done of all the annuals inside and feeding that fire. So, and of course, having lunch and dinner. So, sometimes you just have to do that. That's life, right? We don't just do projects in one full swoop. You can, but sometimes it's okay if it just takes a while. My main thing is I want to get most of this done, if not all of it, before the rain comes tomorrow. That's my motivation. Now it's easy. We got the compost, we got the plants, and I think I got all of them this time. The wind's picked up a little bit. So all I'm doing is I'm roughing up the roots a little bit because they're fairly pot bound. And even though we watered them, they've dried out. So we'll definitely give them a good drink of water when we're done. Just want to make sure that the roots are below soil level and that the foliage is above soil level. And again, I'm probably spacing them closer than what it's suggested. And we'll see how they end up doing. But I have to say, I'm excited about the Brussels sprouts. I really hope that I have luck with them this year. I mean, the plants look beautiful. So I'm really, really hoping that this works out well for me. And if there are any leaves, like I see one right now, that don't look so good, now's a good time to remove them. Have you planted any of your spring crops? And if so, is there something new that you're trying this year? All of this, other than the broccoli, all of this is new to me. You buy a packet of seeds and it's so tempting to just start all the seeds. I didn't even start all the seeds and still I ended up with so many plants. Okay, so the Brussels sprouts are in. Now we're going to do the cauliflower. This is a pretty cauliflower. I got it from Baker Creek and it's a purple color. And 4 is enough for me. The high school that I teach at, I had helped students with growing plants, teaching them how to grow vegetables to then donate them to a local community garden for refugees. And I had told those students, You know, it's the easiest part is planting the seed. And then it gets a little trickier with taking care of the plants as they get bigger. But then I think the hardest part is keeping the plants going until harvest time. And then, of course, keeping up with harvest. But in the end, it's just so rewarding. When it comes to my backyard plant nursery, I haven't done a great job with advertising that I'm selling vegetables, so that's on my to-do list. Probably tomorrow when it's raining. So the broccoli is definitely a little bit on the leggy side, and I had researched this. When it comes to a lot of these type of plants, including broccoli, you can plant them deeper so that they're a sturdier plant, and the plant will be just fine. It's better actually to plant it deeper and make sure that there's a good support to the plant. You don't want it just falling over. If you have to remove a bottom leaf or two, then that's fine too. If we do end up running out of room, which I'm thinking we might, then what I'll probably do is for the cabbage, I'll just plant it down over there. We'll add a little bit of compost and we'll add the cabbage there. I don't want all these plants squished too much. Anytime you plant vegetables or flowers, you always want to make sure you're giving them good water. And it's better to do it on a day when it's not too sunny out, although I know it's sunny right now, but it's near the end of the day, so these plants should be fine. When you're planting these plants, you want to make sure that you just don't bury it too deep. You don't want to bury the crown. So we got 3 left. I had originally thought about planting the brassicas in my raised gardens that I have on the south side of my house, but I decided to I have the space here because we took away the grapes. So I decided this is a good place for them. I'd really love to look into the whole square foot gardening idea though. That's one of my goals for next year. I really want to just maximize my space and do a good job with succession planting and intercropping and all that stuff. Okay, we're going to add a little bit more compost here. We don't want to go too far because of the asparagus. And then we're going to plant the cabbage. I left enough room here because the peas are right there. I want to be able to still walk in here if I need to. When it comes to compost, just 1 inch of compost goes a long way. You really don't need that much. Trying to space these out so they're kind of in between each of these plants. Perfect. And I know I have plenty more cabbage, and if I really wanted to, I could add one there. But I'm not going to do that today. Okay, we're going to keep on going. So on my chart that I had made here, I basically have the peas right there, and coming this way, I'm going to make a row, and in the row, we're going to have the spinach, the lettuce, and the Swiss chard. And I wrote down, just so I had a general idea of, how many days until harvest, and I based the way I planted things based on that. So spinach is about 40 to 50 days for harvest. Lettuce is a little bit later, 45 to 80 days. And then Swiss chard just goes all season long. So that's why I figured we'll leave the Swiss chard down there, and these 2 crops, the lettuce and the spinach, will be done first. And when those come out, I could put something else there. I'm not sure what, but at least it will open up that space. So let's go ahead and get those placed. Now I don't want to forget, I'm actually going to put down some compost first and then we'll get the plants placed. And I want to make sure I leave enough room to be able to harvest the peas. That should be enough, I think. It'll be a close call, but might not be a straight line, but it's okay. And I'm basically leaving room in between so I can still harvest the asparagus and still come in and harvest here. It's a little bit tight quarters, but we're going to make it work. And we're down to our last bucket of compost of the 5 that we got today. I want to make sure I space my spinach out enough because I'm going to assume that I have some sort of a tent here with the insect netting. So we're going to start it over here. We have 4 spinach. Okay, then we have our Swiss chard down here. I'm putting everything pretty close to each other with the intent that I have quite a bit of lettuce that's going to need room in the center here. I have a couple of different kinds of lettuce, so I'm just alternating them just so it looks a little nicer. I mean, why not, right? And if I find that I need to put these a little closer, I can do that afterwards. I figured these are good crops to put here because you can imagine the asparagus is going to get very tall and it's going to shade some of the plants here. And these plants I had researched do fine even if they just get a few hours of sun. So I think they will be okay where we're putting them. All right, let's go ahead and dig some holes and get these planted. Okay, so next on my list is radish. And I do love radish. I like it in a salad. And these are the cherry bell. They should be ready for harvest in 22 days. So I figured that would be a great crop to plant on this side here. It still gives me plenty of room to get in here and harvest my asparagus, but it will be a quick growing crop. So these can still put on some size and get larger. And this grows under the ground, so it's perfect to put right next to the spinach and all the other plants in here. So the main thing is to loosen up the soil because since it's a crop that grows under the ground, you want to make sure that the soil is loosened up enough. These only get planted a ½ inch deep, so we don't have to loosen it up a ton, but just enough. And I'm not going to add any additional compost because there's compost here, so it should be fine. The more I dig around, I think I will add actually a tiny bit of compost because the compost didn't really come out this far, and I want to make sure that I'm giving the radish exactly what they need. It won't take a lot of compost, just a sprinkling. But first, we might as well just loosen up the soil here. That's always the key whenever you're growing anything that's a crop that's going to grow underground, like radish, carrots, anything like that. The ground is definitely very dry. We can use some rain. It's amazing for how much snow we had, how much moisture there was, how quickly the ground gets dry. And there's different tools you can use to loosen up the soil. This is just what I have on hand and it works. I am planning on planting this entire packet. We'll see how far it goes. I don't know how many seeds are in here. I do have another packet of a different variety of radish, so if we do run out, we can plant that one. Now, radish is definitely something that doesn't like to be disturbed once you plant it. So you want to do the best you can to not have two radish seeds near each other. And if that happens, you can always thin them out afterwards. But I'm just picking out a couple of them right now. But it happens where sometimes you just have two that are right near each other. You can always prick one out afterwards. I don't get too hung up on my rows being perfectly straight. Something like that doesn't bother me. And I think based on what I'm seeing, I will probably have extra seeds left over in the end, which is fine. Radish is something that you can succession plant. The same with lettuce, the same with peas. There's a lot of plants that you can do that with. I typically get pretty busy just keeping up with my garden that I don't do a great job with succession planting, but I'd like to. I'd like to get better at that. You know, ultimately the goal is to keep your vegetable garden planted at all times. So when you harvest something, you can then plant something else. I think that's, that's the ultimate goal. Although I think the ultimate goal is just to get out there and plant something, even if it's one plant. Start with that. I tell a lot of people that I talk to that they want to start gardening, and if they especially if they have all these great ideas, but if they're new to gardening, I typically say start small. Start with something simple, like a tomato plant or a marigold, and really baby that plant and master it. Because sometimes if you take on too much, it can be overwhelming. I had loosened the soil, but in hindsight, I wish I had made more of a kind of like a little trench, but it's okay. These should be fine, and if they're not, then so be it. We'll see what comes up. I'm just covering that area where I placed the seeds, pushing down. There'll definitely be tight quarters in here, getting around on both sides, but it should be fine. So there's the row that we just worked on over there. The asparagus is right here, goes all the way down. And I was originally going to plant some radish on this side of the asparagus, but I think I'm going to wait and I'm going to see how the radish does, if it comes up over there. And I'll just put it in my calendar to maybe plant another succession of radish towards this side of the asparagus in 2 weeks from now. So I'll just put that in my calendar. And I think I'll hold off on putting any more radish in the ground for today. Okay, we're almost done. So up against this board on this side here, I was planning to put the onions because they take a while to bulb up. And so I figured if they're up along this board here, they can kind of do their own thing. They're going to get the full sun that they need. And we're going to leave the center part open where I plan on putting my green beans in about 3 weeks or so. So I want to leave that open. And if I did want to put some radish over there, I could. And I still want to plant carrots. And I'm considering planting my carrots in containers this year or in pots because carrots really need a good, well-draining, loose soil. The soil is not the best, and I could amend it, but also I might be running out of room. So if I do the carrots, I may plant some over there as well as in pots, but that will be for a different day. So we're going to wrap up this project with just planting the onions here. Onions like to get spaced about 2 to 3 inches. And we are going to just put the smallest amount of compost here as well. The onions I had started from seed indoors under my LED shop lights. And those are one of the first things that you start indoors actually, pretty early during the winter months. Now you could buy the sets, and that's definitely an option. When you buy your seeds online, you have a lot more variety to choose from than when you buy them, in the stores. And I had put about, I think it was 9 plants in each of these 3-inch pots. They look okay. They look good. I mean, this is pretty much what they're going to look like at this time of the year. You can see that, they have a small little root system and then some green at the top. And that's typical of what to expect when you start them from seed like this. And pretty much from here to here is about 2 inches, but I could go a little bit more than that if I want to. And this is another crop that I've never really tried. I have grown onions from seed before, but then I didn't just get them put out in the garden in time. So, and when I did put them in the garden, I didn't put them in a place where they get full sun. So I'm hoping they will do better here. And now all you need to do is just get the roots under the soil, the green part on the top there. You want to make sure you don't bury it too deep. You can pretty much see where the crown of the plant is. I know some people like to plant them closer to each other, and then they basically eat the greens and pull, they use part, like, basically they let one of the plants bulb up and the other plant they just kind of use for the greens. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just using these so that they can bulb up. I like onions on my non-pizza. Onions and jalapeno peppers. I know it's a weird combination. That's how my parents ate it, so that's how I like it. Once I get all these planted, just like everything else, I'll give it a nice drink of water. So let me finish up and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm all done. Okay, I snagged one more container of onions. I debated, since I was all done with all my onions that I brought here, should I maybe plant something different here? I was thinking maybe lettuce. But nope, I want to stick with the onions, and I want to make sure I have plenty for myself. And on a different day, I'd like to plant some more lettuce if possible, just to have another succession. Even though I don't love the dirt splashing up on the lettuce, I can deal with it. I do love salads, so it's worth it. And definitely want to get my carrots in. And I'd like to try it both ways. I'd like to have some in here and some in containers. Now, carrots, I hear, can be tricky. Not only that, you need to make sure the soil is nice and loose and all that. I've heard that it takes a long time for the carrots to, for the seeds to germinate. So I'll have to be experimenting with that because I don't think we have a ton of rain in the forecast. And I've heard you can sometimes cover them with cardboard or something and lift the cardboard as soon as you see germination. But it sounds like it can take a couple of weeks for the carrots to germinate. So I definitely want to try the carrots. And the cucumbers will end up going, again, towards the back there. So I'll be starting those probably, I'm guessing, in another couple of weeks. And I've had pretty good success with starting my carrots indoors and then transplanting them. And then there's been times when I didn't have great success. So I'll give it a try, and if it doesn't work, then I can always direct sow them. I always like using tools for measuring. It just makes it a little easier for me. And I didn't want to plant the onions like right up to the edge here. I want to make sure they're getting, enough sunlight. And there's still a little bit of space between this last onion and where the brassicas are, but that's okay because by the time I cover the brassicas, I'm still going to need a little bit of room for access to walk in here. So this is a good stopping point for the onions. You can see here we've left room for the cucumbers, and then the onions start over here. And they look good. I was thinking that they looked kind of puny and small, but After I got them out of their pots and I looked at their root system, I'm like, they're perfectly fine. They look exactly the way they're supposed to look. It's funny, sometimes as gardeners, we always question ourselves. Just go with it. And again, you can see here's the last of the onion. There's a little bit of space there, and then the brassicas begin. Don't they look happy? They're going to be much happier in here than they were in their pots. And as you leave the brassicas, we planted our peas along here, and then down along this middle section is some of our yummy different types of leafy greens. The spinach, we have the lettuce, which should really take off now that it's been planted in the ground. And then we have our Swiss chard. And in case you're wondering, that's the asparagus patch. And mixed with the asparagus patch are weeds. So on a different day, I will be coming out here and I'll be doing two things. One of them will be I will be cutting back any of this old growth from last year. And the second thing that's very important is to clean up all the weeds that are in here. But you can see that they are all just popping up out of the ground. When they get even bigger, I'll be sure to give you a tour and show you what they're looking like. I love grilled asparagus. So good. And there you go. The spring vegetable garden has been planted. Even though I still have a few things left, I would say we did a lot today. And I'm very excited about getting this started. And once I get the insect netting on here and I do a tour of the space, I'll be sure to show you how I protect these plants. But I'm not too worried about the cabbage moth coming out yet, but I should be worried soon. So I'll be looking into that. I hope you enjoyed this video, just following me along as I plant up my vegetable garden with spring crops. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.